In a previous podcast, we talked about being a compassionate witness or compassionate approaches. There's different ways of thinking about compassion inside of yourself, institutional, like in schools or organizations in the world, and then interpersonal in your relationships with others. We hear the word compassion a lot, right? It comes up in our world, be more compassionate. It comes up in spiritual frameworks. But what I've seen lately is more of a conversation in mental health spaces or organizational spaces. There's a way of the self relating to other people or institutions and organizations. What I like about it is it can help ground us when we feel worried or confused, or maybe there's a situation with somebody else, we feel a little bit like we don't know what to do. Or maybe there's a situation where there's like a power dynamic in play, and bringing in compassionate approaches can help slow everybody down and get on the same page. My dad used to say something to me when I would get moving too quickly: calm mind, intelligent mind. And I think about that a lot.
Bringing emotional awareness into the workplace, I'm seeing more and more. There is acknowledgement of people in corporate environments, work environments, that there is a mental health crisis and that they have a role to play in helping with that. A lot of companies give subscriptions for Headspace or Calm, these meditative apps. And that's great. In some cases, it's a checkbox where they just provide these superficial things. We're helping with mental health. You have Headspace, but it's really in how you use it. Do you have an actual practice? Is it a consistent practice? Is it a daily practice? When corporations are trying to help their employees, are they really invested in helping, or are they just trying to check some boxes to show that they care when they don't really?
Sometimes they are kind of used as a salve. We've used this approach, and why aren't you feeling better? Especially in the corporate space. You're approaching a moment of upset or overwhelm or burnout, and then these approaches are there for you to be able to use, but they're not expected to fix everything. So getting an app like Headspace and using that can be really helpful in certain moments, but then sometimes that just might be not enough for what you actually need, which might be more support from your supervisor. There's some folks who are really thinking about how do we scale these approaches to help make the human and institution have a better relationship. Being able to take mental health days, I think, is amazing, and that's a great corporate shift, but it may not be possible for some people in certain situations or certain fields, right? I think about ways of even having an internal sense of compassion. A lot of internalized thought process happens when we feel like we're not enough. It even can challenge the status quo to think about self-care and how we take care of ourselves. When we get to a moment of taking care of ourselves, sometimes what gets in the way is a negative voice saying, you don't deserve this, or you should keep working harder. And that compassionate voice, especially if people around you, your supervisor, are saying, no, you should be careful with yourself, or you should take that time. I think that encourages us to take a little bit better care of ourselves.
One thing I wanted to bring in here is this concept of nonviolent communication, NVC. When you're doing communications at work, how can you avoid language that might be aggressive, that might make someone feel less than? There is language of power. You're my inferior and I'm the superior. How can we have a language that's more collaborative? The disagreements are focused more on the issue at hand, not the person. How can you separate talking about the issue from talking about the people and their personalities? Language matters, tone matters. In this go, 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 we need to get these things done mentality, that terseness can let go of that humanness. Even starting a meeting with, hey, let's just take a moment and settle into this, or how are you doing? A moment of connecting as humans before we just jump straight into the business.
Our amygdalas get hijacked even in these meetings, right? It's like the emails give us this kind of life or death response. I think compassionate approaches level the playing field. If your leadership is aware of compassionate approaches and you're aware of compassionate approaches, you can come in all on the same page around moments where language does get big or feelings do get large. Where we can start is with ourselves internally to think compassionately. Also, if the word compassion just doesn't vibe with you, throw that out the window and approach it a different direction.
I like the word kind, being kind to other people. Compassion has a little bit more nuance, but nobody really has an issue with being kind to other people. Or empathy, just having an empathetic approach to try to take other people's feelings and their life situation into account. If someone is struggling, maybe they just lost a loved one, or maybe they're going through a depressive episode. You don't even know exactly why, but just having a little bit more compassion for them, as if maybe they had an illness. If you were hit by a car, you were laid up in the hospital and recovering, people wouldn't have the same expectations about your performance. Give yourself some grace, give other people grace. Having that analogy of physical health versus mental health can really help bring more compassion to people who are struggling.
Dave, I really appreciate how you're connecting the somatic, the mind, and the body together. I know for me that sometimes when I face big moments of stress, I can feel flooded. I can feel worried. It can really come up in my body. When I face those moments, I try to be aware of that, to create a little space and think about something that makes me feel a compassionate or a kind feeling, or just even taking a breath and kind of letting that feeling go. That might look like backing off of a deadline or stepping away from something just for a little while, even not to drive myself, but to know that it's better to take that space and take a step back. And that wasn't something I learned until I was a little older. When I was younger, I was much more about pushing myself and driving myself to the line. And then I'd get to a certain point where I couldn't continue. So I actually learned being kind and compassionate to myself in those moments was actually a way of sustaining and continuing forward. Because if I just took a little break and slowed down, then I could continue after that and maybe even make better choices.
This ties into the self-care we talked about of knowing when you're hitting up against your limits, not judging yourself, not being afraid if other people are going to judge you. I know where my limits are and I'm sensing into that and I need to take a break here. Being more attuned to that is a way of having compassion for yourself. I think that's what we're really talking about, having compassion for yourself and having compassion for others.
I like that we're tying it into real world examples because I think anybody could use this. I think about the young people I often support in really high pressure academic or organizational environments, and they're just thinking about how much further they can push themselves. And sometimes what I'm trying to do is convince them the opposite. How can you slow down? How can you create space? It's a little scary to them at first, but after a few months or maybe even just a few times doing that, they're like, oh, I see what you're saying. I can slow down, but also keep up. It's a couple of resources, one from the University of Wisconsin and one from Harvard. And they have some nice ideas that could just help connect self-care and ways you think about compassion. Take a little space in your day, get outside, take a deep breath. We know that this can help lead to a little more calmer, focused action in your life and maybe some better feelings overall in just how you go about your day.
You're actually touching on the pressures of society on us to perform. A lot of us internalize that, and then we're the hardest on ourselves. I need to perform, I need to achieve. And at some point, we learn people aren't nearly as hard on us as we are on ourselves. Maybe they do have some expectations about our achievement, but it's not as extreme as you might think. What do people care about at the end of their lives? Nobody's looked back on their lives and said, I wish I'd put more effort into that project. I wish I'd gotten that deadline out the door sooner. That is never something people regret. In the moment, these things feel big and scary, like whether or not you get an A or a B or a C on a test might feel like a big deal. In the long run, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And that's not to say you shouldn't put effort in and you should just give up and stop trying. It's just that it's a Goldilocks zone. You've got to give some level of effort, but you don't want to push yourself over the edge to be this cog in the machine that is just churning and churning and churning. The way I treat myself is generally the same way I treat other people and vice versa. Nature gave us this ability to connect with ourselves and connect with others. It's the same set of circuitry we're using. If you have a good relationship with yourself, if you're not hard on yourself, if you give yourself compassion, it's so much easier to bring that to other people. You can't give what you don't have. So you can't give compassion if you don't have compassion yourself. You have to do the inner work first. You have to figure out your own inner demons and maybe some previous trauma. Once you're in a place of serenity for yourself, you can bring that compassion to others. I know for myself in the past that when I was struggling and had this inner conflict and was very judgmental of myself, I brought a lot of those same concepts and values and projected them out onto people in the world. That wasn't fair to them. And it was a very narrow way of looking at the world, and not very compassionate way.
Thank you, Dave. I really believe what you're saying. Compassion begins with kindness for ourselves, but then we can bring it out to the world. So we can really bring it inside of ourselves and then we can give it to the world. There's some resources in the description. Definitely check those out. We appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today. If you want to share this with others, we would be really grateful. Our goal in the world is for everyone to live a happy and healthy life, and that starts with you. See you next time.